It was 4:16 a.m. when alarms screamed through the corridors of the USS Gerald R. Ford. Off the coast of the Philippine Sea, radar picked up what no crew ever wants to see: 12 hypersonic missiles launched directly from the Chinese mainland, moving at Mach 10. No warning, no time, just one chance to survive. What followed wasn't just a battle. It was a showdown that would define the next decade of global warfare. The Pacific ignites. July 18th, 2025. What was supposed to be another quiet show of force patrol quickly turned into the most intense moment in US naval history since World War II. The USS Gerald R. Ford, a $13 billion floating fortress, was patrolling international waters near Taiwan, a region already on edge due to rising Chinese military exercises. Satellite intelligence had indicated some Chinese coastal movements, but nothing out of the ordinary. That changed in an instant. 12 DF-27 hypersonic missiles, each capable of striking with devastating precision, were launched from mobile platforms in the Chinese mainland. These weren't test shots. These were kill shots. The targets: USS Ford and its accompanying strike group, including 2 destroyers and a submarine trailing beneath the waves. The launch was detected by over-the-horizon radar arrays deployed near Guam and Taiwan, but by the time they were confirmed, the missiles had already crossed halfway to their targets. Each weapon was capable of Mach 10 velocity, that's 7,600 miles per hour. At that speed, you don't get a second chance. The call went out across the Ford's bridge. All hands, brace for impact. Seconds to survive. The Ford's crew had trained for this moment, but no drill could match this chaos. The ship's Aegis combat system, one of the most advanced in the world, began automatic targeting. Within seconds, interceptors were launched, SM-6 missiles designed to hunt down hypersonic threats mid-flight. Below deck, sailors scrambled to damage control stations. Fire suppression crews stood by. Above deck, F-35C fighter jets were rushed to launch position. If they could get airborne in time, they could disrupt follow-up waves. And then came the first interception. At 4:17 a.m., 2 of the 12 Chinese missiles were destroyed mid-air by interceptors from the USS Thomas Hudner, a destroyer flanking the Ford. The explosion lit the sky like lightning, raining fragments across the sea. But the others kept coming. Missiles 3 through 6 were intercepted by countermeasures from the Ford itself, RAM, rolling airframe missiles, and last-ditch phalanx CIWS guns spraying thousands of rounds per minute into the night sky. 3 more hypersonics slipped through. One hit water just 100 yards from the Ford's stern, shaking the entire vessel. Another slammed into the radar dome of the USS Chaffee, crippling its sensor array but sparing the crew. The last question marky: it veered off course, possibly jammed by an airborne EA-18G Growler, providing electronic warfare support. Strike back. There was no hesitation. The US response was swift and brutal. Within 5 minutes of the attack, 3 Tomahawk missiles were launched from the USS Missouri submarine lurking undetected 200 miles from the Chinese coast. Their target: the exact GPS coordinates from which the hypersonics had originated. Simultaneously, the Ford's deck crew catapulted FA-18 Super Hornets and F-35Cs into the dark skies, headed straight toward the Taiwan Strait. Each one carried precision-guided munitions and live target intelligence, updated in real time by US satellites. By 4:30 a.m., retaliatory strikes hit Chinese radar facilities near Fuzhou and air defense outposts along the coast. The Ford was no longer just defending itself. It had gone on the offensive. And China knew it. Within minutes, their coastal defenses scrambled fighters, but they were too late. The US Navy had already neutralized multiple missile batteries and jammed large portions of China's radar infrastructure using high-altitude drones and long-range jammers from Guam. The attack had backfired. What began as a surprise hypersonic assault had turned into a global incident with a devastating counterpunch. The battle plan unfolds. This was never meant to be a full-scale war, but it had all the markings of one. As the sun rose over the Pacific, Chinese and American forces mobilized across every axis. The US Indo-Pacific Command in DOPACOM raised alert levels across the region. Japan activated its Joint Command with US forces. Australia and the Philippines were put on standby. Cyber units within US Cyber Command launched a silent war, crippling Chinese satellite links and communication lines in the region. At sea, the Ford was joined by a second carrier group, the USS Carl Vinson, rerouted from South Korea with full air wing support. A total of 120 aircraft now operated in the region, alongside 8 destroyers, 3 submarines, and 2 carrier strike groups. The US Navy had formed a steel wall between China and Taiwan. China's move had miscalculated American resolve. Instead of intimidation, they triggered unity, an overwhelming show of force that signaled to every global power. The Pacific isn't yours to claim. The Ford systems remained on alert. Deck crew ran drills every 15 minutes. Pilots rotated in and out of missions with no sleep. There was no margin for error now. The world was watching. When the smoke cleared. By 6 a.m., the missiles had stopped flying, but the consequences were only just beginning. Breaking news alerts flooded screens across the world. China launches hypersonic strike. USS Ford under fire. Pacific on brink of war. At the United Nations, emergency meetings were called. NATO declared full support for the US and condemned the Chinese act as an unprovoked and escalatory military strike. Markets plummeted. Oil surged past $150 a barrel. Gold hit a record high. Taiwan went into full military lockdown. Beijing, for its part, issued a vague statement blaming technical miscalculations while denying intent. But few believed it. What mattered most was this. The US Navy survived, not just barely, but with dominance. The USS Gerald R. Ford returned to Yokosuka for minor repairs. But its role in the confrontation had already made history. It had faced down the world's most advanced hypersonic missiles, and survived. More importantly, it had struck back with precision and strength. This single battle redefined how future wars will be fought, not with slow invasions, but with hyperspeed missiles, cyber disruptions, electromagnetic warfare, and carrier-based response. What this means for the world. The attack on the USS Gerald R. Ford wasn't just a Chinese test. It was a gamble, a provocation, and it failed. Instead of weakening America's resolve, it strengthened it. The US Navy didn't just defend, it retaliated, coordinated, and escalated with discipline and force. In under 3 hours, America reminded the world why its naval dominance has no equal. And as tensions simmer in the South China Sea, the message is now clear to every hostile actor. If you come for the United States, you better be ready to face a response that's faster, smarter, and more devastating than anything you've ever imagined. Because in today's world, war doesn't wait. If you believe in the strength of the US Navy and our readiness to defend what matters most, hit that subscribe button now. We bring you the most critical military stories as they unfold. Drop a comment. Do you think this was just the beginning of something bigger?